Welcome to a brief pause. We cover a variety of pet related topics, including training, health and wellness, grooming, new products and services that are out there. If it's new, we're going to try to cover it. And today I wanted to talk about the great leash debate, which covers a variety of different facets of that: leashes, collars, harnesses, flexi leads, and all the stuff that goes along with it. And I wanted to interview an expert on this. Here we are today with Zach Kiser, dog trainer from American Dog Pros in Black Forest, Colorado. Welcome, Zach. How are you?
Thank you. I'm doing well. How are you?
Good. So we had a nice chat on the phone. I really wanted to cover this topic today because we have so many new pet owners, but just regular pet owners in general, anyone in general. I feel like it's a common and long running controversy, but I noticed that pet professionals lean mostly one way and pet owners lean mostly another way. So I really wanted to cover this on both two main ones. The big one being collars versus harnesses and all the pros and cons that come along with that, and just training and normal walking, and then different dogs and their physiology and what might come into play with that. Can you tell us your feelings as a professional trainer?
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's not a yes or no issue. There's a lot of complexity to it, and that's why you get a range in views. So we spoke about on over the phone. You mentioned harnesses versus collars, and some of the potential hazards for those. Um, for training purposes, in my mind, as a professional, harnesses have almost no place in training a dog to walk nicely next to you. We use harnesses as professional and competitive dog trainers to create frustration and excitement for various items. And so, if your intended goal was to create excitement from your dog, create frustration, and create drive towards something, that would be the way to go using a harness. Harnesses are designed originally to teach dogs to pull things, and it invokes what's called opposition reflex, which is basically what is the natural pulling behavior. So in our protection sports, which is a lot of what my background is protection sports are doing police, like apprehension dogs, things like that. We use harnesses with puppies to make them very excited about grabbing the bite equipment. And it makes all of the same behaviors that you would see in a leash reactive dog that's walking down the street: barking, pulling, overly excited, all of those types of things we create intentionally in puppies. And so we know for a fact that it creates those behaviors. And when pet owners walk their dogs with those harnesses on them, in many cases, it creates the same exact thing that we know that it does. Um, so that's my thoughts on harnesses versus
Yeah, can you
collar.
tell us more about this background? That's interesting.
Yeah, so I compete in an international competition called Mondio Ring. There are a couple of other so-called ring sports. There's French ring, which is obviously very, very popular in France. There's Belgian ring, which is popular in Belgium. And then the world or international format for that is called Mondio Ring. And that's what I compete in. I competed in Belgium at the World Championship in 2016. And I've competed nationally in America, of course. At our national, we have a national championship every year, and I've competed at that 4 times now.
Cool.
I won in 2016 at our entry level. I went to Worlds and took second place in 2016 as well, and then I've competed a few more times at that level also. So I've also done a lot of police apprehension dogs. So protection based training is something of a specialty for me. But I've also spent the last decade working with pet owners, creating good obedience for them on and off leash as well. Roughly, 2,500 dogs I've trained for pets as pet owners as well. Um,
Now, who do we
and
hear in the
so we
background?
Actually, that is this is a very large dog kennel, and I'm in my home, but the dog kennel is attached, and so you're hearing some of the dogs barking in there, which is actually really far away. I'm surprised you can. I can barely hear it. So, that you can.
It's a
But
pet podcast. It's par for the course. And those who don't know, we're on YouTube, so you can see he's in a facility of some kind. That is a facility you're in, no?
actually, where I'm sitting right now is my home, but the
Oh, sorry,
facility.
sorry.
Yeah, there's 3 sections of dog runs that are attached to the home, with a big training room and an office and everything like that. So it's all attached to the home, and we're on a 40-acre property here, with lots of space for dog activities.
Gotcha. Cool.
Um, Now you mentioned that some of the difficulties that people express with collars around the neck, or the fears that they have, would be trachea damage, and things like that. And so I do want to address the other side of what I was saying. So I don't think harnesses promote good behavior, and it's, for most dogs, it's not going to be effective as a training tool. It's going to be quite the opposite. But flat collars, like a regular buckle collar, the traditional buckle collar that people put tags on, is going to do just the same thing. You're just going to be, the dog's just going to be choking itself out when it pulls, which is also no good. Which is why traditionally leash training has been done either on like a Hermspringer prong collar, or a choke chain, which I'm less of a fan of. Today, I use a lot of slip leads. So kind of a thick nylon slip lead. And if you go to basically any vet office or boarding kennel in the country, and they take your dog maybe into the back for examination, they're always going to take that dog on a slip lead, because of the safety of it. Harnesses lack control. So you're never going to go into a vet office and they're going to say, okay, I'm going to take your dog now, let's harness them up, because they're not going to have any control of the animal that way. They put them on a slip lead for safety and control. And obviously, even at the veterinarians, they're not so worried about injury from the slip lead or the tightening of that they want, that they refuse to do that. Because that rarely ever happens. So of course you have some breeds like Yorkies and Maltipoos and things like that are going to have some, you know, maybe exaggerated sensitivity to that, or more, they're more in danger of that thing. But that's still very rare. I mean, in 10 years of dog training, I've never personally known a dog that injured its throat from pulling. I mean, I know that it does happen, but I would say it's personally very rare. Um, so traditionally that's done with the Hermspringer prong collar. I think that pulling is more likely to cause trachea or throat injury than using a correctional tool. So when we use like a Hermspringer, we use it in a manner of not pulling, but making a pop on the leash, which creates a little bit of a pinch. And that should never cause any kind of significant injury to the dog. That should never cause any skin damage. It shouldn't cause any trachea damage when done appropriately.
Well, I want
The
to stop you there and have you explain, because I think that is one thing people don't understand just by looking at those tools, and they see them in the store, see them on the street, what the design of a prong collar is, or also known a pinch collar as a pinch collar, or the choke collar. And they are starkly different in how they treat the dog's neck. And I would say that in my opinion, the prong collar looks the scariest and is actually the more physically safe and gentle on the
Yep.
dog. Can you explain why that is?
Yeah, so the design of it with the prong collar, it has the two pronged links that go all the way around, and because they go all the way around, when you use it, it disperses the physicality all the way around instead of on one focal point. And so that's one of the reasons that the design is effective that way. Also, you should never, in my opinion, you should never use a prong collar that's not made by Hermspringer. The company Hermspringer, they've been doing this a long time. The ones that you can get at Petco and PetSmart, they're a little cheaper, but they're generally junk. And what it is that the prongs all go the same direction, and so they don't create quite the same effect as the Hermspringer, where the Hermspringer in the center has a dividing point, and they go opposite directions to create the kind of correction that you need for it to be effective. But the prong collar was designed to mimic the way that dogs would correct each other. So dogs correct each other when they're in groups through nips and bites. to set boundaries and to create respect within each other for a hierarchy. And they simply designed the prong collar to be able to mimic that style of learning. And so that's why it's effective, is because the dog naturally understands that type of thing. And I think that one of the biggest problems for pet owners is that they wait far too long to deal with the problems that they have. And so it makes it more difficult and requires more physicality from the prong collar to get the effectiveness. If you take a 5 to 6 month old dog that's socially stable, there's other factors here, but and you introduce a prong collar correctly, the amount that you'll have to use it is typically going to be quite minimal. But when you allow a dog to pull until they're 2.5, 3 years old and they're already out of control, you run into some big difficulties trying to curb that, because you're now kind of violating the expectations that the dog has had. And you're running into something called an extinction burst, where the dog has found success and reinforcement in a behavior. And when you try to stop something that's already been reinforced, the animal is typically going to try harder to achieve the previous results before it actually extinguishes. We call that an extinction burst. So you run into those problems and people don't know how to navigate them at that point, you know? So, and that's what actually I was going to get to, is one of the problems is that introducing a prong collar or a remote collar or a slip lead, any of these tools that are corrective devices, they have to be done with tact and understanding. And so I generally would recommend that unless you have some type of education in that, you should be working with a professional that does. Because there is some fallout and some things that you'll have to navigate as you go through that path. And I think that's what makes it difficult for people, is they want to do it on their own. They believe that pet ownership is something that we should inherently be able to do on our own. But it's more difficult than it might appear if you want to have your dog around city life. If you live on a 40-acre ranch like I do, and you can let your dogs roam and you don't need to restrict them from the distractions of the world, then yeah, of course you'd probably do that on your own. That's not a big issue. But if you want to have real obedience around distractions like you need to have if you live in New York City and there's the entire world going on around you, then I would highly recommend working with a professional.
Yeah. And to speak to a couple things you said, when we wait to 2 years old, and dog years, they are full blown adults
Yeah.
mentally by then. So you're trying to, go back and retrain a dog at 25 years old, basically. And so it's
Yeah.
going to fight that a little bit. And they're stronger and less, bothered by a new sensation like that. And to further reiterate what you were saying about equally dispersing the pinch collar, it's called a pinch collar because it sort of equally pinches the skin a little bit all around, rather than relying on, say, the choke collar, which does just that. It does exactly what it looks like. And both of those
Which isn't very.
tools and huh?
The choke collar is not very effective, and nobody knows that more than the police industry. They've really tried to get by on the choke collar in the police industry a lot, and they've run into a lot of difficulties with that, so they don't get great control of their apprehension dogs and things like that, because the choke collar, just like a harness or just like a flat collar, will simply create restraint. Dogs are very much willing to pull against things. It can't be that the tightening of the collar is not going to stop them from pulling, because it's still a restraint. It's the quick poppy correction from the prong collar that stops the pulling behavior.
Right. So, and all of those things we're talking about, all two of them, but any training tool is just that, it's a training tool. So when you see dogs that have them on as their normal collar and leash, that's not really how it should go. You should be using it during training, for training, and then take it off when you're done training. And that's, again, it's a tool. It's meant to be used when it's appropriate to use it for the purpose that's intended for. And if done right, and leash, if the dog is leash trained properly, you shouldn't have to have it on 24/7.
Yeah, and I agree with you in the sense of the prong collar, but the prong collar has a lot of limitations. So I'm not sure exactly what your position on the remote collar is, but I think the remote collar does everything that a prong collar can do and far more. So when used appropriately, and and that it's the problem with the remote collar is that it's more difficult to introduce to the dog. So I would even more advocate for working with a professional in that regards. But it is applicable whether the dog is on a leash or not once they understand it. And so the diversity of the training tool is far greater. Um, and in the sense of the remote collar, I recommend to my clients that they do wear the remote collar beginning till end of the day. And the reason that I recommend that, at least in the early stages of training, is so that you can have one good consistency with training your pet, because things happen in the moment and you can be prepared for them. But also because if you are teaching the dog that it is the training tool comes on, now you have to be obedient. The training tool comes off, and now there's nothing I can do about your behavior. The dog is going to get wise to the tool, and thus when it's not on, they're going to push the boundaries of things. Now with the prong collar, generally that's an on leash training tool, so of course you're going to have it on when the dog's on the leash, and you're not going to have it on when the dog's off the leash. But
Yeah,
uh,
that's kind of what I was referring to is for leash training. But yeah, you can further explain the remote collar for people that don't know what that is.
yeah, so in our training system, we teach with rewards first, then we move to the leash and collar training. And so we use the prong collar to teach the dog to move. And movement is key. So we spend a lot of time using rewards to teach the dog to move, but we also then teach it with the leash. And so by movement, I mean that I can pick the leash up and the dog sits. I can pull the leash down and the dog lays down. I can pull it backwards, they back up. I can pull it forward, they come forward. I can put them on place. I can pull them into the heel position with no resistance. Similarly to how when you're riding a horse, you can move them in all different directions and there's no resistance from the horse in that. Unfortunately, dogs are more sensitive, less sensitive than horses are. So there's a little bit more difficulty in it. But once we've instilled that on the leash, we can transfer it to the remote collar. And now we can do everything that we wanted to do with the leash without the leash, which is infinitely more uh, fantastic for us, right? So we can do a lot more that way. And that's how we get fantastic off leash control around distractions is via that sequence of events. So but it's difficult to introduce the remote collar unless you have a good understanding of how the other training tools work, which is not what pet owners, that's not where they're at, right? So that's, I think that it requires a professional.
Yeah, that's why the main purpose of me even having this episode was just to even begin uh to start the conversation in their mind that they may not, if they're a new dog owner and they've seen these, that they may not understand what tools they have. It's not a sort of purchase it and put it on and it fixes or solves a problem or anything like that. It is a tool meant to be used the proper way, and just to begin start educating themselves on it, or if they're not getting the results that they intended, now maybe thinking into why, or seeking out the help that they may need, to get where they want to go. The other topic I wanted to talk about, we're talking about collars and leashes and leash training, is the two major leashes that you see. Of course, there's a ton of variety, but the especially for a new dog owner, the first thing they go into the store usually and buy is the leash, and they'll tend to buy a flexi leash or a regular leash. And there is major differences and problems with those that you wouldn't necessarily anticipate. And you see that it's hotly debated with people. So I wanted to get a trainer and also a pet professional's opinion on that
Sure.
as well.
Yeah, I absolutely think that the Flexi Lead comes with a lot of dangers. Now, I don't want to go as far to say that nobody should ever use a Flexi Lead. I feel very comfortable using a Flexi with my dog, but he's very well behaved. And so if your dog is under good control, you can recall them very reliably. They can walk next to you around distractions very reliably. They have good. You've done your part that way. Then a flexi lead can be fantastic. I don't I don't personally use them. If I take my dog somewhere, a lot of times it's off leash, and I have the remote collar, and I'll call him back if I need to, make him walk with me if I need to, and give him freedom when it's appropriate. Um, but the Flexi Lead, if you know what you're doing and you have good control of your dog, could be perfectly fine. The reason that the Flexi Lead leads to a lot of injuries is because people are using them with dogs that are not under control. And so they are, there's so many things that can go bad with the Flexi Lead. Obviously the dog can run out in front of somebody, they trip over the leash, the dog can wrap people up, and that leash is a thin, like a thin sharp thing. People get seriously injured from it wrapping around them. And then I think the worst of all is that the dog can run, like can take off after something. You hit that button and it stops immediately. And either you're getting hurt because you're going to jerk forward, or the dog is going to get hurt because it jerks back. And if the dog's in a harness, it's probably you that's getting hurt. And it's maybe for somebody who's very strong, it's gonna be okay. But a lot of people are gonna get hurt from the dog hitting that line so hard. So for all those reasons, I think the Flexi Lead is not a great idea unless you have great control of your dog.
Yeah, we were talking on the phone, and I was expressing, because you're obviously in a very different part of the country than I, and you definitely see people get booby trapped, trip lined on the streets of New York with that thing all the time. And A, it's because people are moving or maybe jogging, and B, it's because it's so tiny thin of a little rope that you don't see it as easily. So if, an owner's over here and they're not paying attention, or they've just allowed their dog to walk even 3 feet on a busy sidewalk in Manhattan, is like, you're trip lining somebody for sure. And people get hurt that way. Also, now that we're talking about that, can you tell us more? Is this associated with American Dog Pros, the kennels? Is that your family's kennels?
Yeah, so my family and I are in a partnership here with American Dog Pros in the property here. So yeah, it's so it's American Dog Pros that operates in here. We do boarding and board and trained. We do group classes. We do private lessons. We have 50 indoor out, or about 60 honestly, indoor outdoor dog runs, with 2 big play yards in the center of that kind of compound. We have a large training room, and then we have several training fields on the property as well. And we're looking to expand that in the future. We're going to put up a larger building for indoor training, hopefully get some more amenities as far as like recreational dog activities like barn hunt and dock diving, etc.
Oh, that'll be fun. That's very cool. So yeah, tell us where we can find American Dog Pros, and your partnership and your facilities.
Sure. Yeah, American Dog Pros is on. We're on TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, Patreon, Facebook. Of course, we have a website. It's American Dog Pros on all of those social media apps. We have pretty large following. We try to post entertaining content and informational dog stuff. And then we have a paid subscription-based Patreon that has some instructional lessons on how to train your own dog at home.
Very cool. Is there anything else you'd like people to know on this topic that we wouldn't have thought about?
No, I mean, the big thing for me is that you have to train your dog. So a lot of people are under the impression that they are going to just say words to their dog, and the dog is going to inherently learn those words. And that is, in general, not true. You have to establish understanding on what those words mean, and there's a process that we go through to create that consistency. We teach about it on our Instagram and other social media platforms, but you can't. And pulling on the leash is one of the most dangerous behaviors that dogs can do for the dog, for the people, and the people around the dog and the owner. So you have to train your dog, whether it's working with a professional or learning how to do it yourself. You have to train them.
Yep, it's true. That is definitely the end all be all. I'm pretty sure on any training related podcast that I have, we make sure to say that at some point that you have to do it, and it's worth every penny to get a trainer if you don't know how to do it. And most people don't inherently just know how to do it. So just learn. And once you learn how to speak to your dog, again, it's worth every penny, and it can really make life much better for you and your dog,
Yeah.
and much more rewarding once you kind of learn how to talk and speak and handle your animal. It really can bond you very, very well. Well, thank you so much for being on. And I hope to speak to you again on more topics in the future. And I can't wait to further peruse your TikToks and see all these cute dogs and learn more from you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I really appreciate your time. Thanks for having me on, and hope to hear from you in the future.
Absolutely. Sounds good. Thank you for listening. Be sure to follow us on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok if you're not already, and join the community. Let us know what you think. And we'd love your feedback and your likes and your subscriptions, but most of all, your ideas. What else do you want to hear and see and learn about pets? Till next time.